Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. I'd like to welcome the TEEP back to the podium for the question and answer session, which we did not get to before lunch. So I would like to open the question and answer session. As my colleague indicated before lunch, we will be doing these in order of the Technical Options Committee reports that are in the document, that are in the progress report. And the first one of those is the FOAM's Technical Options Committee. So I would like to open the floor for any questions specifically about the FOAM's Technical Options Committee report. The floor is open. I do not see any delegations wishing to ask any questions of the FOAM TOC co-chairs. If no delegations wish to take the floor, we will thank the FOAM TOC for their time and move on to the next Technical Options Committee. Before you leave, sorry, I've just had a party request the floor. I know, you were so quick. Anyway, thank you, Mozambique. You have a question for the FOAM's TOC. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. It's not regarding the report, but something related with the team. First of all, Madam Co-Chair, accept our apologize. When we took the intervention in the morning, we used the bypass. We didn't congratulate the co-chairs and to thank the Ozone Secretariat as well, MLF, for funding our delegation. Coming to the main intervention, we have two questions. The first one is regarding the reference of refrigerant. We learn from some workshops, the gas R410A, the letter A is capital. But when we are doing the test in the border and in the market, in these last years, we identify some mistake in the composition of the refrigerant 410A.
I'm sorry, Mozambique.
Yes.
Is this a question to the FOAM's TOC or is this a question to the refrigeration TOC?
I just want to clarify, because I'm with my colleague from Customs Officer, one was working in the border, how to identify what is the problem. Is it the identifier or the composition of the refrigerant? Because we're not sure what is the problem. We changed the identifiers, but it's remaining the same issue. The letter A is not capital. And how to know is genuine or not? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mozambique. We might come back to your specific question when we come to the RTOC. So you said you had a second question. Was that in relation to the FOAM's TOC, or is that also a refrigeration question? Mozambique, you have the floor.
Just for refrigerant when we're importing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if you could come back to your question when we get to the RTOC questions, that would be terrific. Okay, are there any questions for the FOAM's TOC? This is the first time we've done this, so this is innovating. But if there are no questions for the FOAM TOC, I do see Argentina. Please stay. I see Argentina wishes to take the floor. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta, copresidenta. Nuestra consulta está relacionada con uno de los elementos resaltados en el informe del grupo de técnicos sobre espumas, a quien agradecemos la presentación igual que a todo el TIP. Y aprovechamos la ocasión, que es la primera vez que intervenimos, para también agradecer al gobierno de Tailandia por la cálida bienvenida y a la Secretaría por la organización de todos los documentos y de la reunión. En relación a nuestra consulta particularmente, el punto tiene que ver con, se menciona que se notan o se detectan progresos y que casi ya ninguna empresa continúa utilizando sustancias como los HFC como alternativas, pero por otro lado, cuando se hace la presentación final en relación a los PFAs, se resalta la cuestión de las implicancias que eso puede tener. Nosotros en lo particular seguimos notando demoras en la entrega de HFO para formulación. En el caso puntual de Argentina, hemos avanzado ciertamente en la proveeduría, pero sí, sin embargo vemos demoras muy grandes en los procesos de abastecimiento. Entonces nos gustaría saber si efectivamente esto fue algo que vio reflejado el TIP, y que cuando ellos hablan de que todavía quedan algunas empresas utilizando HFC, cuál es la envergadura de esas algunas empresas, dado que, como hemos visto en el informe que se preparó en el marco del tema que trata esa cuestión también, en el marco de las reuniones del Comité Ejecutivo del Fondo Multilateral, también se han marcado demoras en la implementación de los proyectos y no solamente fueron algunos casos. Sabemos de una de las 3 empresas productoras que de hecho hasta el año que viene no va a estar produciendo, con lo cual entendemos que si bien han habido progresos, no sería una situación de que ya lo estamos resolviendo, y queremos entender si el comité comparte esa visión y se han detectado estos problemas de abastecimiento, sobre todo porque se mencionan también cuestiones de soluciones mezcladas con hidrocarburos, por ejemplo, cosa que entendemos que no es el caso para el uso de spray, por ejemplo, que necesariamente necesita de HFOs como alternativa. Y después haremos la pregunta correspondiente en relación al punto de los PFAs cuando llegue ese punto, si es que se va a abordar de esa manera. Y si no, en todo caso, pedimos a la copresidencia que nos aclare si lo formulamos ahora la pregunta en relación a eso también. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Argentina, for those questions. And I'll come back to the FTOC co-chairs in just a minute. I also had Myanmar wanting to ask a question of the FTOC. Myanmar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Co-Chair. So this is first intervention of Myanmar. So Myanmar would like to congratulate the ozone security in the host country, Thailand, for the warm welcome and hospitality. And we would like to congratulate to the TIP members as well. So my question is related to the refrigerants. In some years...
Myanmar, I'm sorry, we'll come back to questions on refrigerant later. Do you have a question in relation to foam?
Or not yet.
Okay, we'll come back to your question later. Thank you so much. We'll keep you in mind for that. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And being the first time that this delegation is taking the floor, Kenya would like to thank the government of Thailand for the warm welcome and hospitality since we arrived here. We'd also like to thank the Secretariat for the well-organized meeting. Would like to also congratulate the 2 co-chairs on your appointment. Would like also to thank the TIP for their presentation that was well done across all those items that they presented on. Our question is on the issue of the form. So when Kenya carried out its data collection during the KIP preparation, there were challenges in getting informed data from rack equipment with form containing controlled substances, which could not be accounted for as their methodologies of checking for their quantities were not known. This delegation would therefore like to ask TIP how to quantify such controlled substances in rack equipment. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Kenya, for that question. I don't have any other delegations wishing to take the floor, so could I ask the co-chairs to respond to those two questions, please, from Argentina? In fact, there might have been a couple of questions from Argentina and from Kenya.
Thank you, Argentina. We were eagerly awaiting you asking a question. We were disappointed at first. I think we were trying to portray that in non-A5 parties, largely there's been a move away from most HFCs except for 152A. Certainly in A5 parties, there is still plentiful use of HFCs. And there is still some small amount of use of 141B. We'd have to go back and look at the actual amounts, but it's gotten to be fairly small now. We could certainly look that up and talk later on in the week. Separately from that, I think that you asked around the supply chain issues for HFOs. So we've certainly seen some improvement. But it doesn't feel fixed until it's fixed for you personally. So although we're seeing some increase and hearing more increase in availability of HFOs, I think we still have some anecdotal evidence that it's not completely solved yet. So thank you for that. And then let's see, what did I miss? Separately from that, I don't know if there's some companies accept foam blowing agent in a cylinder rather than a drum, and so there may be specific supply chain issues to the cylinder rather than from the drum perspective, which we have certainly seen some gaps there in other parts of the world, even in non-A5 parties for other products. And then,
just an additional comment. Yes, we've seen some difficulties in the supply of cylinders, this 1-ton cylinders, because the logistic is a little bit complicated to receive and then to send them back. So the suppliers are facing some difficulties. Maybe you may set up in the country a distributor that can deal with these difficulties related to cylinders. This can happen, but we believe this could be solved soon.
And I think you were asking as well around, so we also see that there's improvements, but not everything is solved. We agree. And then on mixing with hydrocarbons, the flammability limits in foams are quite specific, and transport of even foam blends with hydrocarbons is quite specific, and rules are local, of course. But certainly, the safety requirements need to or should be followed. And so, certainly that is something we could maybe talk offline in further detail. Yeah. For Kenya, you were asking about data collection for foam in equipment. So certainly, various types of equipment, whether it's refrigerators or refrigerated equipment like transport refrigeration equipment, or even other types of equipment can contain some foam. And so it would have to go back through the supply chain to the manufacturer to provide that data for parties if they're interested in collecting that. Anything else?
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you very much, colleagues. In relation to your question about PFAS, we can come back to that, and you're very welcome to ask the question when we come to the general Q&A. Okay. I don't see any other Sorry. What I'm trying to do is to elicit the parties to ask questions, not to get you off the podium. So Mexico, thank you very much. You have a question on foams.
Y muchas gracias, señora copresidenta. Perdón por tardar en hacer la pregunta y hacer que regresaran los colegas de FTOC. Quisiera saber si existen comentarios con respecto, más que una pregunta, es información reciente que tenemos en el caso de México que puede ser útil para la labor de FTOC. En primer lugar, quisiera reafirmar el compromiso de México con la transición hacia alternativas de bajo potencial de calentamiento global en el sector de espumas de poliuretano. En el marco del Plan Sectorial de Espumas de México, aprobado por el Comité Ejecutivo de Fondo Multilateral, hemos dado inicio a actividades conjuntas con proveedores de sistemas y pymes para explorar alternativas a los sistemas basados en HFC, reconociendo plenamente los desafíos que conlleva esta transición. Nos complace destacar que se han logrado avances significativos y transiciones satisfactorias en diversas aplicaciones de espumas de poliuretano y que otras se encuentran en proceso de migración. Sin embargo, aproximadamente un 10% de las aplicaciones, particularmente sectores relacionados con el confort, como es la industria del calzado, enfrentan limitaciones considerables para lograr una migración completa antes de 2029, esto debido a la ausencia en el mercado de alternativas que sean seguras, duraderas, competitivas y de calidad. Factores como los costos, aspectos de seguridad, especialmente relacionados con el punto de inflamabilidad en el uso de hidrocarburos y la rápida degradación de algunos sistemas basados en HFO, restringen la viabilidad de estas opciones para dichas aplicaciones. México mantiene su firme compromiso para dar cumplimiento a los objetivos de migrar el sector de espumas fuera de HFC y continúa buscando alternativas factibles que garanticen una transición sostenible y competitiva de nuestras plantas productivas y de sus clientes. No obstante, consideramos importante reiterar los retos existentes en las aplicaciones en las que la transición a alternativas distintas a los HFC en el corto plazo resulta compleja debido a la insuficiencia de opciones adecuadas en el mercado, que creo que está muy vinculado a comentarios que se han hecho por parte de Argentina también anteriormente. Entonces, con esta información me gustaría saber si FTOC pudiera aportarnos comentarios adicionales. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mexico. I think there was a question in there. Colleagues?
Okay. Thank you, Mexico. We absolutely see different subsectors of the foam industry still having challenges. Certainly the cost of the new foam blowing agents we've seen a trend of foam manufacturers blending fluorinated chemicals with other chemicals to try to reduce cost or reduce the amount and add some more water. And there are certainly sectors, and especially for small and medium enterprises, there continue to be some challenges. Spray foam would be one. There are others where there are special challenges from a safety perspective, as well as from just an application perspective overall. Do you want to add? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Maybe in the area of microcellular foams, for example, which is a little more complex, the processing. We have to consider that when using HFO, which requires less quantity So when we compare, for example, to 365 to 27, the difference in cost won't be too much different. And then adding other blowing agent with lower cost in very small amounts, which doesn't make the product flammable, will help to maybe reach this same performance of foam. So it's a balance in quantity and just adding another blowing agent to find a good compromise in cost and performance. So blending is the solution if water cannot be added due to performance. We can talk later if we have more time to discuss.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you to Mexico for your question. Are there any more questions for the foam talk? Burundi, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Mesdames les coprésidentes, distingués délégués, le Burundi tient à exprimer ses sincères remerciements au secrétariat de l'ozone pour l'organisation de cette réunion, combien utile pour préparer la prise de décision bien réfléchie dans la future réunion de haut niveau. À nos agences partenaires, l'OPNUE et l'ONIDI, pour leur accompagnement constant et leur excellente collaboration dans la mise en œuvre du protocole de Montréal, nous disons aussi merci. Le Burundi tient à adresser nos vifs remerciements au gouvernement et au peuple thaïlandais pour leur accueil chaleureux, leur hospitalité exemplaire ainsi que pour les excellentes conditions mises en place pour le bon déroulement de cette 47e session du comité OEWG, y compris le visa électronique. Je joins ma voix à celle des autres pour vous féliciter à votre position de coprésidente pour cette réunion. Grâce à ces différents soutiens, le Burundi s'est engagé dans la réduction des HCFC, renforcer les compétences de ses techniciens en climatisation et intensifie les efforts de sensibilisation nationale. Nous restons toutefois confrontés à plusieurs défis que je ne peux pas énumérer ici parce que je prendrai beaucoup de temps, mais comme c'est la première fois que je parle, le Burundi demeure pleinement engagé et solidaire dans cet effort collectif mondial et dans sa vision de développement 2040 pays émergents, 2060 pays développés. Le Burundi souhaite saluer le travail remarquable du TIP et de ses comités techniques, notamment les deux premiers, le FTOC et le STOC. Et surtout, nous suivons avec une grande attention les évaluations en cours relatives à la transition vers les alternatives au halo et HFC dans le système de lutte contre l'incendie. Nous souhaitons pleinement les efforts du type pour approfondir l'évaluation des solutions alternatives respectueuses de l'ozone et du climat et la nécessité aussi de renforcer les capacités techniques et l'appel à davantage de contributions régionales, notamment les pays importateurs comme le nôtre, dans les travaux d'évaluation à venir et les projets pilotes, y inclut les autorités nationales de normalisation, les services de douane et les importateurs. Face au risque croissant d'incendie aggravé par le changement climatique, il est essentiel que la communauté internationale continue d'appuyer la recherche d'agents de suppression efficaces, sûrs et accessibles pour tous. Le Burundi se tient prêt à contribuer aux discussions techniques futures et encourage l'inclusion active des pays à capacité limitée dans ce processus. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Burundi. I note that your comment was related to the Fire Suppression Technical Options Committee, not the FOAMS Technical Options Committee. Are there any questions, remaining last questions for the FOAMS Technical Options Committee? Okay, I see none. So thank you very much. FOAM's Technical Options Committee. And can I ask the fire suppression co-chairs to come to the podium? Thank you very much. And I'm now going to open the floor for any questions to the Fire Suppression Technical Options Committee. Please refrain from making statements. Please be very specific and brief, if you can be, in relation to your questions that you have. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. First of all, we'd like to thank all the talks for the information provided in the different reports. It's very useful, and you see that's a lot of agenda items are springing forward, and we could probably even put more on the agenda if we had time from all the good information you're providing to us. So that's for all the talks. Also, in particular now for the fire suppression talk, thanks for alerting us to the issue of ICAO. We'll be speaking to that in a moment. I just have three brief questions, if you will indulge me at this point. So we read with interest that there are some not-in-kind solid aerosols, new alternatives in fire suppression. So maybe you could give us some more information on the state of testing, on the results so far, and the way forward for these options. A second question is related to the issue of halon destruction in the US that you alerted us to in the past. We just wanted to know, because we read that there's no new project to your knowledge in the US. Do you have knowledge of any such projects elsewhere than in the US, in the world? That would be the second question. And the last question is that we note this emission factor of 26% for the feedstock use of halon, which is of course very high, and you seem to link it to the production sector. And we would like to hear from you if there's any way you can explain how such high emission factors can result from feedstock use, if you have any insights or speculation on the process, how such a high factor may be the result of feedstock production. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, EU, for those questions. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and our thanks to the TEEP, and in this case in particular to the FS talk. And I don't want to repeat some of the relevant points that the EU just made, but maybe just with regard to the emissions factor, we understood that to be related to feedstock, and we would like clarity if it was feedstock use or feedstock production. We are also not sure if that is a question we should be asking to the FS talk or the MC talk, since it's covered in the report in both instances. So perhaps they will inform us on that. We had a couple of other questions as well. The report itself focused quite a bit on the enduring uses of halons, which was broader than just civil aviation. In fact, it included oil and gas, military, civilian aviation, and nuclear power stations. It also noted other clean agents, not just 1301, that are being used. For example, I believe for nuclear power, it calls out explicitly HFC 227EA. So I think our question would be whether or not some of the guidance that we've heard from the FS talk on the management of clean agents with regards to halon should be considered by the parties more broadly. Do they see where we may need to be thinking about controlled substances used as fire suppression in these types of enduring uses more generally, rather than just limiting ourselves? Because right now we are obviously facing questions about availability of halon, but those questions could come up in other areas in the future. So we are curious about that. Our second question does pertain more specifically to 1301 and its use in civil aviation. We would like a little clarity from the FS talk with regards to the indication that there might need to be an additional 50 years of supply in their estimates. Were those estimates taking into account both the use of halon 1301 in aviation generally as well as new type certification, or was that only about new type certification? Because it could be misleading to think if we did something in one area that would suddenly make the whole problem go away, as opposed to being more of a management issue long-term. And somewhat related to that is a question about if the FS Talk has any information they can provide on 1301 availability today, in terms of whether or not we're seeing this. There's both a short-term and long-term issue, and we're curious as to what they could say on the short-term side. I have two more questions. This somewhat also related to aviation, but perhaps a little broadly. Both 2BTP neat and 2BTP as a blend with CO2 were discussed in the report. We are wondering if the FS Talk has any information they can provide with regards to weight penalty that might be associated with the CO2 blend, or whether or not they think that is both are potential alternatives that could be used in civil aviation, obviously irrespective of whether or not there are regional regulations on that. We're just more curious from a more technical standpoint. And then our last question perhaps is not covered in the progress report, and it's an area of interest to this party, which is about powdered aerosols being used, I think in this case, perhaps for just the non-enduring uses. We'd be curious if the co-chairs could provide us with some insights on powdered aerosols, and perhaps in terms of their use in both occupied and unoccupied space, and in particular, whether or not the co-chairs are aware of any concerns with the use of powdered aerosol alternatives for fire suppression applications in occupied spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United States. I have Canada on my list, but I might turn to the co-chairs first because there were quite a few questions there. So can I ask you to respond to those 3 questions from the EU and I think about 5 questions from the US?
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the EU for their questions. The first one related to the not-in-kind solid aerosols. This is a fire suppression technology. It's been around for a number of years. It's kind of niche and it's used in certain applications, but not very broadly to my knowledge. It's definitely not a clean agent. There will definitely be a solid residue post-suppression, which is one of the reasons it's found limited applications. And I think while I'm on, I'll turn to the question from the US on the similar topic, I think. The FSTOC has long held concerns about the use of these materials in occupied spaces, in addition to the solid propellant, which is generated at the time of need by a pyrotechnic reaction. It generates very, very small particles that can get into the lungs, so there's a concern there. Sometimes toxic gases can also be generated by this pyrotechnic reaction, which is why generally they are approved for non-occupied spaces, but I believe there are some listings for occupied spaces. But I think as we learn more from a toxicology perspective, those reviews possibly need to be looked at again. Anything to add? Okay. Yes, and there have been sadly one or two occasions where the use of solid aerosol fire suppression systems have resulted in human fatalities. So clearly it's not ideally suited for normally occupied spaces. Thank you.
The question from the EU on halon destruction, no, we are not aware of at this time any campaign on halon destruction around the world. We are aware that in the United States there are still advocates for this. We have been trying to convince them that, you know, destroying halon to only have to remake it is not a good plan for the environment. But so at this time we're not aware of any, but we do track that as best as we can. The 26%, if you, and we coordinate this with the MC Talk, they shake their heads like, how can that be? But then when you actually run the math, and we had a member from the scientific assessment panel sit with me and say, I told everybody I was going to take a half an hour to prove you guys wrong. He said, instead, I spent an hour proving you were right. And so the 26% is right, but it's absurd. The only reason that we can gather, and we have some specific data we can show you, it's not from the production of the feedstock. It appears to be from the use of the feedstock. There's a patent, major patent in this area, how you make fipronil, that shows there's a 75% yield from the amount of halon 1301 you put in. So to us, that means maybe that 25% that's not consumed as part of that is somehow being allowed to enter the environment. We don't know if it's possible to, you know, to prevent that, or if there are ways that they should be doing. But so at this point, that is our only supposition.
And I'd like to add to that, that was one of the reasons why in our presentation we asked for regionalised emissions data, which would help to pinpoint this potentially down to, if not very specific regions, at least generalised regions of countries where the use of 1301 as a feedstock may be occurring, and we can kind of tie the two together. Thank you.
On a question from the US related to enduring uses and, you know, clean agents more generally, I think the example of nuclear power plants, where if it has currently a halon 1301 system in it, you don't want to take the power plant offline for how long it will take to retrofit to an agent, because there's no drop-in. It's very similar for oil and gas. If you had a 1301 system in place, you need to maintain it. When you're putting new systems into a nuclear power plant, you would likely use one of the HFCs, probably 227EA, or possibly the fluoroketone, but there seems to be more comfort in the HFC 227EA. Hopefully that kind of addresses the questions. I'm just trying to see, there's one more here. You got the timeline? Yep, good.
Okay, thank you. Double act here. Regarding the question on civil aviation from the US and the timeline that we mentioned, 50 years, it is possible. We mentioned the design of completely new aircraft. You might be aware that once a type certificate has been established, the airline equipment, the airline aircraft manufacturers typically then create variants or dash numbers. You know, so you'll have seen an Airbus A320 and then an Airbus A320 new engine option, and the Boeing 737 went through a classic phase and then a dash 800, 900, then the MAX phase. These are all tweaks or slight, subtle, or sometimes fairly major design changes, but they are not referred to as a type certificate change. So for one type certificate, you could easily have a production run on that extends for the 50-year time period. So currently, an aircraft that is being produced under a type certificate, that aircraft may have a 15 to 20-year production lifetime. Then you've got the last aircraft produced. That could easily run for another 25 or 30 years. So you're up to 50 years there or thereabouts. If towards the end of its production run, the aircraft manufacturers make a design change, the individual aircraft is certified under the original type certificate. So that extends it further. So that was the current situation. But the rule was under ICAO that after 2024, no new type certificates would be issued with 1301. This is the piece that may change, which has then extended this whole timescale even further out. So hopefully that answers your question, US. If you want further clarification, maybe we can discuss it further in the margins. Yes. There was also a question from the US on the weight penalty of both neat 2BTP and BTP blended with carbon dioxide. The first one is quite easy to address because it's in portable extinguishers, and we know that, or at least I know, that the weight of one is 2.5 pounds. That has been replaced by a 3.75 pound 2BTP extinguisher. Fortunately, it still fits in the same canister and the same design envelope, so that's okay. So that's a 50% weight penalty for a relatively small piece of equipment. When we look at the design of the 2BTP CO2 system, that gets a little bit more complicated because of the different design parameters for the initial discharge and the extended discharge whilst the aircraft is seeking a safe place to land. In broad terms, that weight penalty is going to be something similar, but it will be very, very specific to the design of the aircraft. But as I said in the presentation earlier, the 2BTP CO2 system was the leading contender in aircraft cargo compartment replacement up until the uncertainty and apprehension around the PFAS regulations. So that's now either on a very go slow or completely paused by the companies pursuing this endeavour, and they're waiting to see how the PFAS regulations land. And this is the reason why they're looking to extend the 2024 mandate, because even if it was finally deemed acceptable, it might miss that it will miss that 2024 date for a new type certificate. Hopefully that's clear.
Thank you very much for those answers, and hopefully they have been satisfactorily answered by the co-chairs. I now have Canada and Kuwait on my list. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thank you, FSTalk, for your detailed answers to all these questions. I mean, it's very educative. I have 3 questions. 2 relate to the recommendations that you have put forward in this report. So firstly, you suggest that the TEEP should evaluate the suitability of the existing EUN procedures in a situation where all parties may need to have access to HALON 1301 under an EUE. Now, without getting into the rationale for why, an EUE may be needed, I mean, we're going to be discussing that, when this issue is substantively addressed under 4D. Why would we need to review the procedures for an EUN in this case? I mean, there's something about, those procedures that you foresee would need to be changed. So just wanted a little bit more context or rationale for that one. Similarly, if you could provide more explanation of why we would request the ICAO to provide all locations of the maintenance, repair, and overhaul operations that are authorized to service HALON 1301. I mean, we suspect this is to perhaps assist you further in refining your model of use and emissions, but would be interested to understand better, what you would do with this information and, what purpose it would serve. Then finally, it's mentioned in the report that for aircraft registered in the EU, portable fire extinguishers using 1211 have transitioned to 2BTP. We're wondering, do you have information about aircrafts registered outside of the EU? Has there been also any transition to 2BTP outside of the EU, or is it just within that region? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. Kuwait. Kuwait is not at his desk. Thank you very much. I don't see any other requests for the floor at this point. Can I just quickly come back to Burundi? Your earlier statement was in relation to the fire suppression talk. Can I just ask whether you had a specific question for the Technical Options Committee on fire suppression?
Je voudrais soumettre ça à ce groupe, mais aussi pour les mousses, je voudrais que le Burundi soit dans le possible dans les pays pilotes, dans les évaluations des produits importés. Et je vous remercie, monsieur, madame.
Thank you very much for that. I see that Iran has asked for the floor. Iran.
Good afternoon. Since this is the first time these delegates take the floor, first I wanted to thank the Kingdom of Thailand and also the people for hosting this meeting, and also thanks for the Secretariat to organize such a wonderful meeting, and also to congratulate the co-chairs to being selected for the chairing this August meeting, and thanking the TIP members to present such a informative reports. My question is very simple. I can see that this the report covers many industries like civil aviation and nuclear powers or this thing, but I can see the railway industry and also the transportation system is not there. As I was checking, the AI says us that more than 400 billion passengers kilometer annually use the railway. Whether I'm just wondering why this is not covered in the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Iran. I might turn to the FS talk on that point, but it might be a broader issue. But anyway, can I turn to the co-chairs to respond to the questions from Canada and whether you have any observations in relation to the question from Iran? Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. If you will indulge me, I forgot to address one of the questions from the U.S. on availability. As we stated in our progress report, we believe, based on significant evidence, that right now and over the next few years, there will not be any shortage globally for HALON 1301. That does not necessarily mean you will have the HALON in the exact place that you need it. So you might have some regional imbalances, which are important. But from a global perspective, we believe that there's more than enough halon 1301 to cover what is currently needed in all of our enduring uses, or even some cases they're not necessarily enduring in that they'll come out of commission, in the near term as well. But we do think there's more than enough halon 1301 for now. On the question, Canada, on the EUNs and EUE. Right now, as we understand, in EUN, EUE, a party has to come forward with an amount and a justification providing the information as required in decision 425. When you think about aviation and global nature of aviation, we can see that it is hard for any one party to be able to predict if they will need halon 1301 to support aviation, because it will depend upon mostly if they have discharges. And discharges are not something you plan on, but they do occur. So if a plane is in a small island country and has landed, and they've had to have a discharge in, say, the engine, and there's no halon there to replace it, that aircraft is grounded until they can fly in from someplace halon. But if that was newly produced under an EUE, they would have had to have the EUE approved for them to have that maybe 6 kilos of halon. And we could be talking as little as, a few kilos in some countries, but we could be talking about tons in other countries that do more servicing. And that ties to, I know Adam's going to talk about one aspect of the MROs, but it ties to, we're asking about the MROs because if not every country services bottles, that might help us with what changes we could foresee possibly being needed to account for civil aviation. So it was not just for modeling purposes or getting local emissions data. It is really also for trying to get us the information that the parties will need in order to address this.
I think you've covered it.
No, it's also, I did, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I think Dan's covered the MRO piece. I think he's explained that pretty well. Looking at the 2BTP transition, my understanding is that, at least for the UK that I'm aware of, pretty much all UK civil airlines have transitioned as they are required to do by the end of this year. Other countries are working this, but without the regulatory incentive, they're probably not working it as hard as they can. Certainly I know that the company I work for, which sells 2BTP portable extinguishers, we're pretty busy, so that they are being adopted globally. Whether they'll all be done by the end of 2025 globally, I doubt, but significant progress is being made. And finally, the question from Iran. Our understanding, and it's our understanding as of today, we can go back and delve into this a little bit more, is that trains are typically not protected with gaseous fire extinguishants. Some I know have foam systems are applied, but typically they're not protected with gaseous extinguishants, such as halon or halon replacements. There is one exception to that, which I'm aware of, which is the Channel Tunnel train between the UK and France, and that does have a halon system in the locomotive because of the potential consequences of a fire in a tunnel under the English Channel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. Are there any other questions for the fire suppression talk co-chairs? I don't see anybody wishing to take the floor. So thank you very much, co-chairs, for your participation. I also note that both the foam talk co-chairs and the FS talk co-chairs have offered to have some bilateral discussions with delegations if you're interested, and I would really urge you to take up that offer if you have more questions you would like to put to them. Can I invite now the methyl bromide TOC co-chairs to come to the podium, and I would like to open the floor for any questions for the methyl bromide TOC co-chairs in relation to the progress report. Thank you. Nigeria, you have a question. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I would like to commend MB Talk for the progress report. The report did mention that over 85% of the MB used for QPS is vented directly to the atmosphere after treatment. My question now is this: how can these huge MB emissions be prevented, noting that MB is toxic and also an ozone-depleting substances? Like, for example, in my country, MB is used for treating hibiscus flower for export under the QPS exemption rules of the Montreal Protocol. And this is done in a fumigation chamber to reduce venting of this MB to the atmosphere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigeria. Are there any other delegations wishing to ask questions of the MB Talk? Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And since it's the first time this delegation can take the floor, we would like to thank the people of Thailand for their very, very friendly welcome always. We are always happy to be here. The Secretariat, who's as friendly even with the high levels of stress they are suffering right before this meeting. And also thank you for the assessment panels. Without your great work, we wouldn't have so much good and valuable information here. And lastly, co-chairs, you're doing a good job. Thank you very much. So to our questions to MB Talk. We noted that the MB Talk mentioned in its progress report under the title of Expected Workload 2027 and Beyond that it would deal with findings or developments related to ODS not yet controlled under the Montreal Protocol and which are relevant to MB Talk's expertise, for example, nitrous oxide. So we would be interested in understanding better, in the specific case of nitrous oxide, which sectors or processes MB Talk would focus on in its upcoming work, and if also the MC Talk would be dealing with the issue of nitrous oxide. Maybe MC Talk could provide an answer to this under the next sub-item of this Q&A section. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. Are there any other questions for the MB Talk? I don't see any delegation wishing to take the floor, so can I turn to the MB Talk for answers to those questions from Nigeria and from Switzerland? Thank you.
Yeah, in response to the question from Nigeria, the emissions are high from durable commodities and perishable commodities because they're just vented directly to the atmosphere. However, there have been big strides in some countries to use recapture. And that requires specialist machinery and commercial companies, and it imposes a cost. And they're generally imposed because the country puts in a policy to reduce emissions, and therefore those recapture technologies become economic because they have no other alternative. So New Zealand has implemented recapture based on emission policies, which say that you have stepwise reductions in the amount you can emit down to zero by mid-2030s. That's driving recapture technologies which are now economic. And so that is under the protocol. Every assessment report, we have an emissions chapter about recapture, recovery, and other aspects, and we ask you to read those, but you need a big stick. You need a policy because there's a cost imposed. So I hope that answers your question. It can be done, and it can be done technically well and commercially well, but you need an incentive. Thank you.
In response to Switzerland, it was not the intent of MEPTOC to say that we will be working on nitrous oxide. It is not our current mandate. What we meant to say is that currently the committee does have the capacity to address issues such as nitrous oxide were they to come by, since they deal with agriculture or have that potential. We do currently have that kind of expertise in our committee. There are members with expertise in nitrous oxide emissions and uses, etc. So MEPTOC would be prepared to restructure or reinforce that kind of expertise. It is not foreign to us at the moment, but we do not, again, intend to say we will be working on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. This is the last chance for questions to the MB talk on methyl bromide. I don't see any delegations wishing to take the floor, so thank you very much, co-chairs, for your time. I'm also now going to turn to my colleague, Chantal, to take on the rest of the Q&A session. Thank you very much, Chantal.
Thank you, Annie. Good afternoon, everyone. So continuing on, our next Q&A session will be focused on the Medical and Chemical Technical Options Committee Progress Report. So as the committee comes forward, I'll invite parties who have questions specifically for the MC talk to kindly indicate and make your request for the floor. Okay, so I have requests from the floor from Bangladesh and Cuba. So Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Since this is the first participation of Bangladesh delegation in the discussion, I would like to thank to the government of Thailand for their outstanding hospitality. I would also like to thank TAPE and talk committees, all members, for their very informative reports. Our concern is about the economic viability and safety issues of new low GWP MDIs. We'd like to get more information on economic viability and safety issues. As you know, considering the growing health concern, these information are very crucial for any intervention to made. Besides this, I also like to get some information on another issue. In the presentation, you forecasted that after 2030, HFC 134A or HFC 227EA can be unavailable. I would like to know what are the cause behind this statement. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Bangladesh. I see that we have Cuba and then the United States of America. So if the committee permits, I'll allow Cuba to ask their question. We collect the questions from Cuba and the United States. So Cuba, you have the floor.
Sí, buenas tardes. Primero que todo, por ser la primera intervención de nuestro país, quería agradecer al gobierno de Tailandia, a la Secretaría por la preparación, a las dos vicepresidentas, al TIP, al TOC y todos los implicados en esta reunión. Primero que todo, se ha comentado durante la exposición de los inhaladores de uso farmacéutico que este año tendríamos empresas con la producción y comercialización de aerosoles con R152A, 1234ZE y comentan que aún están en los estudios y ensayos, información que tenemos presentes desde aproximadamente hace unos años. Recordamos que estamos en la necesidad de comenzar a realizar la reconversión de las plantas con R134A para las empresas que tienen los aerosoles farmacéuticos. Es necesario todo el apoyo para estas empresas en vías de reconversión para agilizar el tema. Una pregunta que le quiero hacer a los especialistas es qué información hay sobre dichas reconversiones, si las empresas ya están comercializando el producto y si para las empresas como la de nuestro país hay grandes cambios sustanciales y recordar siempre, bueno, también los niveles de seguridad porque estos dos refrigerantes, uno es inflamable y el otro es ligeramente inflamable. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Cuba. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. We have two questions for the MC talk. The first is to pick up on our question that we asked of the FS talk with regards to the emissions factors for the use of halon in the production, I guess in that case it was of fipronil. We're curious as to how that compares to feedstock use more generally, feedstock use of ODS. That 26% seemed like an outlier perhaps the way it was described, and we're wondering if that is true and if they could give us some better sense of how that fits within the general use of ODS as feedstock. Our second question is, and perhaps it's more of a curiosity on our part, we're not really sure what talc manages uses that aren't specific to the name, and we think it's the MC talc, but we're not really sure. So for example, etching for semiconductor application, etching is a use that is a growing use globally. Etching would not fit from our perspective under the other talc. So we're wondering if the MC talc, for example, is the talc that is tracking those types of uses. If they could confirm that for us, it would help us better understand, because we do have some questions that perhaps we would even be willing certainly to take up in the margins, but we're really not sure who to ask. Thanks.
Thank you, the United States. Give the floor to the talk to respond.
Thank you very much. I'll try to answer Bangladesh and Cuba in one I'll try to make sure I cover your points exactly. I think that the reason we think that about 90% of inhalers use pharmaceutical grade 134A, and that is produced by a single company based in the United Kingdom and exported into Europe and other places to make the MDIs. If you're going to produce a new pharmaceutical grade material to put in an inhaler, it probably takes at least 2 years to qualify it. The company in the UK is also making 152A now, and so as a pharmaceutical grade, and it's indicated that beyond 2030, supplies will become, they've started to phase down, I think. So we think that 2030 is a moment at which pharmaceutical grade HFC 134A for MDIs, for particularly non-A5 countries, and all those companies in Europe particularly, I think you said saw on the slide that half the MDIs in the world are made in Europe. So that could compromise, and that's fired a lot of activity in what's a pretty mature pharmaceutical industry now. I explained that 9 companies already announced that they've got R&D underway, and major programs are underway to do that in non-A5 parties. We have early information that a company in India and maybe 2 companies in China, which currently manufacture 152 and the HFO, could be moving to manufacture pharmaceutical grade materials, and those could be used in developing countries, pharmaceutical companies. But at this point in time, we have no information. If they're going to do that, they would need to move quickly to get those approvals done. One Chinese company, we understand, has made an approach to the US FDA. So I think that my view about this is that the transition to low GWP inhalers will happen quickly in non-A5 parties. But as I pointed out, there are a lot of companies now manufacturing affordable, often SMEs, manufacturing affordable inhalers in A5 parties. So accessing the propellant will be important if they're going to transition. Cuba asked a very important question there about whether this was an easy change to make. And the answer is that it's not. Certainly the companies in Europe that have switching to 152 have set up new safety standards and fire protection standards within their factories to cope with a more flammable propellant, sorry, forgive the word, yeah, and more flammable propellant. So I think this isn't an easy situation, I think. Above all, as a physician, we don't deliver inhalers very well, affordable inhalers very well into many parts of the world. I'm talking about Africa, for example. Many patients can't afford the inhalers that are available now. It's really important that those patients don't get disadvantaged in any transition. I'm completely signed up to that. Does that answer your question? Cuba as well. I can't see Cuba. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Question from US. The emission factor is usually from 2 to 4% from assessment and measurement from feedstock. And the other question was semiconductor or semiconductor etching followed by MC talk. And this will be in a next assessment report 2026. So we are now investigating update information for the semiconductor etching.
Yes, thanks for the relation to the first question from USA. And yeah, I have 13.1 is the emission rate. We are also concerned, but as we know, As the well management facilities, they always equipment with the destruction facility equipment. So the emission rate in our assessment is about 2 to 4%. Thank you.
Thank you, Talk. I hope those responses address the questions. I now have questions from the EU and Canada. So EU, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I'm afraid I have a couple of questions on this topic. So starting with the issue of the MDIs, we read in the TIAP report that due to a tightly controlled pharmaceutical quota scheme that we're supposed to have in the EU, just to note, it's not limited to the pharmaceutical sector, stock building will not be possible beyond currently held small volumes. And we're a bit surprised how you arrive at that conclusion, because a stricter phase down affecting the MDI sector is only from 2030, and any gas put on the market until then, placed on the market, can be stocked, used, sold, whatever, without any further use. So there is ample time to do stock building. Another issue is that in the TIAP report we read that the inward processing relief is cumbersome and administrative. That's another surprise to us, because we have similar uses from, for instance, the car industry. They avoid quota by using the IPR, and we think that the same way, once pharmaceutical companies have acquired the internal know-how, they can also use that. It would also not be affected by quota, and that also is about the export of the MDI, so they could be importing gas under that, not use quota, and that could also be used for the export. Then the TIAP mentioned the price sensitivity of the new gases and inhalers in A5 countries. That's something we would like to better understand. Maybe you can give us more information. When we made the study on the EU market, the price of the gas was actually a very small portion of the price of the inhalers. So I'd like to understand if there's a fundamental difference between the case of the EU and the Article 5 countries. Another point, something you wrote in the report, is that R152A, which is not classified as PFAS under any proposals as far as we know, that there could be PFAS impurities, and we'd just like to know what these could be. That's on MDIs, and then just a couple of questions also on the issue of feedstocks. The TIAP states that the feedstock use of carbon tetrachloride has increased in recent years due to the growing demand for lower GWP HCFOs and HFOs. So do you expect a further increase in feedstock production due to the higher demand for 1233ZD and HFO 1234YF and others in the future? And maybe the last question, or surely the last question, we'd like to know on the issue of feedstock, what information would be very valuable to the TIAP? What information is TIAP lacking so that you could refine emission estimates for feedstock substances in the best way? So in other words, how could we as parties help the work of the TIAP in arriving at better numbers for emission estimates? Thank you.
Thank you very much, EU. I saw that Canada no longer wishes the floor. Okay. And I see that Kuwait is requesting the floor. Kuwait.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. First of all, let me say sorry for the previous one. I think I touched it by wrong and I leave the room. So now it's reality. So I just want to have a clarification from a statement was mentioned about the MDIs, that they are only one manufacturer in Europe that use 134A as a refrigerant, and to my extent knowledge that I know there is a manufacturer in India, and I just want to confirm if that is there, why it's not being mentioned or missing or what, because that will change the issue, because we want to understand to which extent that manufacturer can supply MDIs with 134A. I think it will be beyond the 2030 or beyond 2034, beyond 2035, I think, or more. So just I need a clarification about that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuwait. I now pass the floor to the members of the committee, the co-chairs, to respond. You have the floor.
My preamble to this is that I'm a physician, and some of the import-export regulations into Europe I'm not an expert on, and so therefore I will not opine on them if that's okay. But I think that we were informed that there could be unanticipated consequences of first of all, the bulk import of 134A from America, probably US, Canada, I think, into the UK, then a purification to a pharmaceutical grade standard, and then export into Europe to manufacture into MDIs, and then export of those MDIs from Europe. I think that what you say is correct, but I don't think any pharmaceutical company's got to that position yet where they're needing to engage in those issues in relation to quotas, is my understanding. In relation to stockpiling, 134A industrial standard operates continuously, and you can do short-term campaigns for to purify to pharmaceutical grade. My understanding is that current containers to maintain that stockpile are very limited because it's a, use it, make it, send it. And so to do that would require a temporary build of expensive equipment. And also, I think there's a limit on the amount of time that you're allowed to stock materials for pharma grade activity. Would need to be requalified if it went beyond a specific date. In terms of price, you're correct. I think that the actual cost of the propellant is not a major component of the ultimate inhaler cost. On the issue of 152A being caught by PFAS regulations, again, it's simply a concern that de minimis impurities could exceed a limit specified under some regulations, and therefore I don't think it's an issue, but we wanted to flag this as a possible issue. I think that, was there another question? I've done about 5, I think. Sorry, if I may come back. Q8 asked a specific question. Apologies. You asked about a company in India that currently manufactures industrial grade 134A. Our understanding is that that is correct. It's as you say, it's, if you take a longer time horizon, then it's likely that we understand that they are moving to manufacture pharma grade materials. As I think I explained, it takes at least 2 years to qualify a new propellant into an existing inhaler with an existing product. And so that's certainly true in Europe and I think the US as well. And so you're right, long-term supply of pharma grade propellants, both the HFO and 152A, could come from manufacturing A5 parties. And so it may be that A5 parties will be able to sustain their own inhaler industry from their own propellant manufacture. I don't see any immediate pressure on that at the moment. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Question from EU for regarding the CTC. So CTC stock, feedstock is likely to increase depending on take up HFOs.
And just to add to that, again, that does not mean that production emissions will increase drastically, because of course those processes are very well controlled on the grounds that they have CTC is considered as a highly toxic chemical, and most sites measure the CTC at the fence of the facility to ensure those levels aren't exceeded. To answer the second question, you asked the question of what information is lacking to help us with emission estimates. I think that's an extremely important question, because we do not have very much site data on emissions of feedstock from the feedstock plants. So I believe that the information that would certainly help us would be local site measurements, so fence measurements on emissions from the plants, and from continuous site measurements, I should say. And that should be backed up with local and regional atmospheric measurements, which can then be coordinated as well. And by having those two areas covered, it would help us. And there's been a recent paper on the Netherlands plant in Dordrecht, which has helped us on estimating the emissions from a plant. That was a specific study where they put in markers, but that has really helped us with our estimates. Just to finish with the question that Switzerland asked earlier on about nitrous oxide, we do not have any expertise in the MCTOC to discuss nitrous oxide. It is outside the expertise of all our members. Thank you.
And continue with first response. As for the informations, I think so lucky not only just from the production of the feedstock, and also from the use of the feedstock as a raw material. This process, I think, for us, for the production, maybe we have some experience, expertise in this industry, but for the use section, we have, because wide spread use for the feedstocks, so this also lacking of the information, and very useful for us to estimate the emission rate whole. Thank you.
Thank you, co-chairs, and I do hope that the responses provided were adequate. And if there's always an opportunity to discuss further in the margins as well. Are there any other requests for the floor? If not, we can release the MC talk. I'm not seeing any further requests for the floor. So thank you, MC talk. We now move to questions from the floor on the R-Talk progress report, including the responses to decision 36.2 on LRM. Earlier, there were interventions from Mozambique and Myanmar, so I would invite them to make their request for the floor, along with any other parties that have specific questions for the RTOC, on the RTOC progress report. So the RTOC members are ready. I see requests from the floor from Nigeria and Ecuador. Nigeria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. My delegation will like to commend TIP on the progress made in providing further updates on the RM activities in response to Decision 36.2. We also thank parties that have provided information on the RM activities. As reported by TIP, efforts in the advancement of RM practices globally are being hampered by a global shortage of necessary refrigerant identification equipment and leak detection systems are not readily available. In TIAB's views, how can these issues of availability and accessibility of RM essential equipment or technology be addressed, especially for A5 countries in the context of the Kigali implementation plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. Ecuador, you have the floor.
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias, señora copresidenta. Ecuador desea agradecer sinceramente al Reino de Tailandia por su cálida hospitalidad, a la Secretaría del Ozono por la excelente organización de esta reunión y al panel de evaluación tecnológica y económica por su valioso trabajo y los informes presentados. Nos complace intervenir por primera vez en esta asamblea y aprovechamos para destacar un tema que consideramos de creciente relevancia para los países latinoamericanos. En los últimos años hemos observado un aumento en los costos de los HFCs que en algunos casos supera el 40%. Esta situación está generando en nuestra región una sensación de desabastecimiento, ya que los altos precios están desincentivando la importación, afectando la disponibilidad de sustancias y comprometiendo el acceso a tecnologías de refrigeración esenciales. Nos preocupa que este fenómeno pueda dar lugar a una falsa percepción de cumplimiento del Protocolo de Montreal, al reducirse artificialmente la demanda sin una transición efectiva hacia alternativas sostenibles. En este contexto, quisiéramos preguntar al panel de evaluación técnica dos cuestiones. La primera, ¿ha analizado el TIB estas dinámicas de mercado y sus posibles implicaciones, incluyendo el riesgo de tráfico ilícito de estas sustancias o la ralentización del cumplimiento de los compromisos de eliminación? La segunda, ¿qué recomendaciones propone el panel para mitigar estos riesgos y apoyar a los países en desarrollo en una transición real, segura y económicamente viable? Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ecuador. We'll take questions from Micronesia and then Cuba, and then allow the panel a chance to respond. So Micronesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. On this agenda item pertaining to refrigeration, our delegation would like to thank the TIP for yet another excellent report on the critical topic of life cycle refrigerant management. The content of the report is very helpful in strengthening our understanding of these evolving issues and supporting our decision-making nationally. In fact, for countries that have limited research and scientific resources, like ours, the technical and scientific information of these reports are invaluable. The report is also critical for our cooperative decision-making. Having said that, we have a few specific questions for the TIP. The first question, regarding the topic of LRM, we would like to know whether the TIP was able to consider the information that countries submitted to the Secretariat in the progress report. If so, was that information helpful, or how might it be more helpful? The second question, could the TIP provide observations on how the existence or lack of regional cooperation could impact countries' ability to fully carry out LRM practices? And lastly, we'd like to know whether the TIP was able to consider the content countries have included in their NDCs relating to the cooling sector, and in particular, aspects of LRM in their national planning. And if not, is that something that could be included in the final report? Micronesia extends its appreciation for the space to table these concerns and questions. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, Micronesia. We'll allow the question from Cuba and then hand over to our talk to respond.
Sí, muchas gracias. Desde hace unos años se viene dando la promoción del uso del R290, el propano, en el aire acondicionado tipo split, que es una de las tendencias fundamentales en el sector residencial, y se ha visto una tendencia del uso del R32, recordando siempre que ambos refrigerantes son inflamables, aunque el R32 con menor inflamabilidad. ¿Qué ha ocurrido con el uso del R290 en estos equipos tipo de split, lo cual no existe un seguimiento real en el mercado y hoy se hace muy difícil comprar para los países del artículo 5 los split con R290? ¿Por qué la tendencia ha sido hacia un refrigerante más que a otro cuando el propano sabemos que tiene un uso importante en los países del artículo 5, es decir, los refrigerantes naturales? Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Cuba. And now hand over to the committee.
For the distinguished delegate of Mozambique, when you have a refrigerant mixture, you should have a capital and uppercase letter following the number to distinguish between the different composition of the same refrigerant of a mixture having the same substances. So, for example, an R410, the A has to be an uppercase letter, not a lowercase letter. If you receive a refrigerant cylinder with a lowercase letter, that is typically a red flag, and that means that there is something wrong with it. Small case letter comes with single substance or pure substances like R134A or R1234YF. So these refer to isomers and not refrigerant mixtures. For Nigeria, the distinguished delegate from Nigeria, I think it's important to understand that in order to address the challenges associated with the it's important to build the capacity and also work with the implementing agencies to receive support to build the capacity for technicians for the refrigerant identification and leak detection, whether on a national scale, and make sure that you equip the technicians appropriately. Do you want to answer Ecuador, or do you want me to answer it? No, you go ahead. Okay. For the distinguished delegate from Ecuador, we understand that the cost is going up for some of the HFCs, but that is more of a supply chain issue, and it differs from market to market. It's not necessarily in all regions. So it looks like it was a case in Ecuador. We do not necessarily track the market transition in regions, but we do look at some leading regions just to look at the difference between the HFCs and low WP refrigerants, and we have seen that in previous TEEP reports, and not necessarily in the progress report, but in different TEEP reports. to analyze the trade and its impact that was published in the Energy Efficiency Task Force report to show that the impact of refrigerant was not the most relevant impact on the refrigerant choice. In terms of what is the most economically viable option, the most economically viable option is typically dependent on the market dynamics and what is relevant for your situation. I cannot say for sure what is good for Ecuador, is good for Egypt, is good for Nigeria, is good for New Mexico, or for Mexico, sorry. So it depends on the country, and I would stop there, but we can talk offline. For Micronesia, the submitted information was collected, and we have seen the compilation of the document by the Secretariat, and I think it unfortunately did not come on time, but we will make sure it will inform the quadrennial assessment report. In terms of the regional cooperation, we believe that the life cycle refrigerant management is an important topic. It takes, as mentioned in the presentation earlier, what we have achieved so far, or the reported achievement so far, is not enough, and there is a huge potential to be achieved. We see significant progress in regions like Europe, or the European Economic Region. So again, if people work together, definitely they can achieve better progress. With regard to including LRM or cooling initiatives in NDCs, again, that is something that we can include in the quadrennial assessment report as part of the policies and policy integration. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Cuba, you did make an intervention. It came across to both the co-chair and the talk co-chairs as though it was more of a comment about accessibility and availability of R290. Did you want to ask a question or just to emphasize that point?
No, era una pregunta que estaba haciéndole a los especialistas de por qué ha sido tan baja la comercialización de este producto en el tema de los split, principalmente el uso del aire acondicionado tipo split del R290, sin la tendencia.
So the commercialization of R290 has been lagging primarily due to the challenges associated with the safety standards. However, as we have elucidated earlier in our presentation, there has been much progress on standards. So IEC 6335-2-40 has been updated and now allows for up to 988 grams where we call it M1 charge, so without control, and that would allow for more charge to be used in the future. But manufacturers are treading this very carefully because of the high flammability. R290 is what we call higher flammability refrigerant. R32 is mildly flammable refrigerant. So the major difference is R290 when it sees a spark, it will propagate the flame very fast, right? So it will burst into flame very fast. Whereas R32, when it sees a spark, first of all, it needs to see a high energy spark, actually an open flame, and then the flame propagation is very slow. So it's much easier to control flame that is coming out of R32. So you can put larger amounts of R32 in the equipment compared with R290. So manufacturers know how to make energy efficient R290 equipment, but they are concerned about the safety of mini split R290 equipment, especially because they cannot control the installation. Whereas if they put a manufacturer sealed equipment, like for example, the window propane unit, these are on the market, there is no problem because it's a sealed unit. It will not leak for 10 years. Or if we talk about portable air conditioner, it's a self-contained unit. There is no on-site assembly, so there is no problem with a technician having to connect tubes on site. It's manufacturers feel very easy with the refrigerant.
Thank you. Moving on to the United States of America, followed by Kenya. So US, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. We wanted to ask a couple questions of the RTOC. First, we noted that the RTOC made a point of indicating that there were no new single component refrigerants, yet also indicated the emergence of a number of new blends. We'd just like the RTOC to perhaps confirm what we understand that to be, which is it may not be a problem that there are no new single component refrigerants given there are many new blends, but we would like the RTOC to confirm that as our takeaway message from having looked at the report. Secondly, we noted that the RTOC notes a number of factors that manufacturers must consider. That included flammability, toxicity, pressure, the stability of an alternative. We wanted to make sure, again, that our understanding is correct, that in doing so, you're not necessarily indicating one factor over another, but more that there's sort of a comparative analysis that a manufacturer may do that considers all of these factors. And if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on that, we would find that helpful. Sort of picking up on the response to the last question on sort of the M1 and how the, for example, 2-90 works, and even more specifically, when you're looking at the flammability between refrigerants. For equipment, just to ask the counter question from what you described, in a scenario where you are perhaps installing many different types of valves or flanges or other kinds of connected materials, and where technicians are going to work on the system, is there an advantage perhaps for the less flammable alternatives, whether it's the A1 or A2L refrigerants? Do you see an advantage there, as well as an indication of what the charge sizes would be and whether or not it's appropriate to use certain refrigerants where you need larger charge sizes with consideration of the flammability of the actual refrigerant? For example, R290 is very flammable. Do you need specific limits on charge size, as then are those limits lower than perhaps R32 or R454B, for example? And then with regards to the transportation of refrigerants, in particular, we are interested on sort of if you have anything you can share, and we're not sure if you do or not, but in particular on availability of cylinders, particularly cylinders for A2L refrigerants. Both R32 and 454B are in increased use. We know your report really focuses perhaps more on R32, but at least for us in our country, we are seeing both 454B and R32 emerging as alternatives, and we're curious if you have any information you could share with regards to cylinder manufacturing and availability for transport of those refrigerants that require, for example, 20-pound cylinders rather than 30-pound cylinders. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. The next speaker we have on the list is Kenya. We have Kuwait, Mozambique, Malaysia, and Cameroon. We would like to close the list, so I'm asking for parties who have additional requests for the floor to please make them, because we have gone over significantly with time. So I'll allow the questions from Kenya, and then Kuwait, allow the committee to respond. So Kenya, you have the floor, and then Kuwait.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We would also like to join the others in thanking the TIP for the progress report on this issue. Kenya does not manufacture any refrigerant, but handles these refrigerants in terms of consumption, recovery, reuse, venting, and disposal. Considering lack of destruction facilities in the country, designated refrigerants for destruction are collected and sent to a collection center for export to countries with destruction facilities. This means that the collectors of refrigerants for disposal would be meeting the costs in transporting recovered refrigerants to designated centers. We would therefore like the TIP to share any information with this delegation in dealing with this issue of transportation and the cost to the collection centers, as it may have a negative impact on the RAC technicians carrying out this important exercise of recovery of refrigerants. Also, this is a challenge faced by our National Ozone Unit because through the NOU, the RAC technicians were issued with the recovery units, and we would also like them to report on the quantities that they have recovered. So if the TIP could share in the assessment and from the reports that they have received on LRM, whether there are any best practices that could be borrowed on this particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. I now invite Kuwait to ask his questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. And I would like to thank the TIEB and ARTOC for the report. I just have a short question, like a specific clarification on the low GWB alternative for the RAC sector. How is the uptake of such alternative is happening, and where is the source of this data and this uptake coming from for the RTOC eventually, and also the effect of adopting such kind of GWB, low GWB alternative within the segment and the signal that we are talking about, PFAS also affecting this refrigerant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kuwait, for being clear and brief. So we have closed the list, and we now invite the co-chairs to respond to this round of questions.
Thanks to the distinguished delegate from the USA. Yes, we believe that having identified no new single component is not a problem as long as the community or the technical community continues to work on blending and finding solutions, lower or alternative solutions that can mitigate the high GWP refrigerants and try to meet the Kigali targets. With regard to the refrigerant choice, it's a delicate matter, and in fact, we have to look at not only the safety, but also the economics part and the performance. So when we look at an alternative refrigerant, we balance multiple things. Safety, which includes, as you rightly mentioned, flammability, toxicity, pressure, but we also have to balance the economics of the problem, which means like how much would the system cost by implementing the new system, what would be the additional cost of the refrigerant, We have to also assess the performance of the new system. Is the new refrigerant more efficient, less efficient? And by doing so, we start with a large amount or a large pool of refrigerant and go down to a more refined select list. And eventually, the original equipment manufacturer will down select to few select refrigerant that they feel more comfortable working with. When we think about site installed versus sealed equipment, there is a huge difference in safety options. And again, we always resort to the safety standards. So there is either in the US ASHRAE standard 15 and ASHRAE standard 15.2 for residential, or ISO 5151. So basically, these are called the application standard. How much refrigerant is allowed for the different application. And these standards tell us how much refrigerant is allowed based on the type of the refrigeration system. When we are installing the system on site, that means that there is a higher likelihood for refrigerant leakage. Whereas if the system comes sealed from the manufacturer, then there is less likelihood for the leakage. And also, manufacturers typically feel more comfortable with systems that they have they seal on site they seal at the manufacturer, because they can test with helium for leak testing and make sure that they are leak proof for 10 years or more. So typically we do follow the charge limits and ensure that sealed systems typically use less, while they require less charge. The charge limits in both systems are controlled by the same amount. Sites installed units are more hazardous. When it comes to transportation, we acknowledge the importance of R454B in the US, and actually also internationally. There is a renewed interest in, or there is an interest in this refrigerant, and we will focus on it. R32, we did not collect information about transportation, so let us review this information and get back to you. For the distinguished delegate from Kenya, we would like to get on the margins with you to talk more about the issues related to the difficulties. But in general, the cost borne by the RAC technicians and the National Ozone Unit as they go through the recovery and destruction process has to be a sustainable process. This has to be a sustainable process, an economically viable and sustainable process. And typically this can be done through a carbon pricing scheme. And finally, for the distinguished delegate from Kuwait, in terms of the low GWP of RAC equipment, the uptake that we have seen is primarily based on the numbers and the large the large numbers of R32 equipment that we have seen in the market. So basically, if you look in China, Japan, India, Australia, most of Southeast Asia, and now getting into Africa, we see market penetration of R32 mainly for mini-split units, getting to close to saturation conditions. For central air conditioning equipment, there is a difference. There is a different story, but we are starting to see R32 getting into the market. We see R32 package unit. We are seeing R32 central equipment. We are seeing R32 VRF. It's not mainstream, but it's becoming part of the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you. And now for the last round of questions, I have on the list Mozambique, Malaysia, Cameroon, Myanmar was attempting to close the list, given that we are well over time. If Bhutan and EU have really short interventions, we can entertain them. So I'll give Mozambique the floor, but we must close with the EU. Mozambique, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Thank you for the answer, Tip. But there is some questions will remain in our side. The answer was good, excellent, according to the Bureau standard procedures. But the question, the second I will raise now is, we identified this gulf in Mozambique. Where is the gaps, in this case, in the other side? I do remember that 2 years ago, we had a discussion regarding the regulations, and we said that all the countries must have regulations. If Mozambique was possible to identify these gaps in the exporter country, they could do the same before to export the chemicals. So that's means something is failing. And my question now, I'm addressing this to Ozone Secretariat. To who should I report this situation? To the exporter country, to the customs officer, or to the exporter company? I mean, we can retain the vessel or the ship with the goods because there's some problem in terms of the quality of the product, but to who should report this situation? To Ozone Secretariat, to the customer of exporter country, or to the exporter company to the origin of the country? Thank you.
Thank you, Mozambique. I will allow the Secretariat to respond and then continue with the list of speakers. So if the co-chair understood the question correctly, Mozambique has indicated that there is a gap in terms of the identification of certain refrigerants. So the question to the Secretariat is, given that there seems to be a lack of enforcement on the exporting country side, which is in contravention with their local regulations, to whom should they report this issue?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. If I had understood the question of Mozambique, clearly it seems to be a question of enforcement that is a matter between the exporting and the importing country. So I would think then, under the circumstances, that the report should be made to the authorities of the exporting country. Of course, we also, if you think there might be some illegal trade involved, you can voluntarily also provide the information to us in the Secretariat, but we would have no authority over the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. We move on to the interventions made by Malaysia and Cameroon. So Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Since this is the first time I'm taking the floor, allow me to, on behalf of Malaysian delegation, to express our sincere appreciation to the government and people of Thailand for their gracious hospitality and warm welcome. We are wish to extend our congratulations to both co-chair on your able leadership, and our heartfelt thanks to the Ozone Secretariat for the excellent arrangement made the 47 OEWG happened. Malaysia thanks to TIP for their excellent work in preparing and updating finding in the progress report. And Malaysia also would like to convey this deep appreciation to all presenters and also panelists for the valuable, insightful experience and also recommendations shared during yesterday LRM workshop. And Madam Co-Chair, we recognize that effective life cycle refrigerant management is essential to achieving the objective of both ODS phase out and also HFC phase down. The availability of accurate and comprehensive data for the development of ODS and HFC banks inventory are the fundamental to the success of such efforts. We will therefore appreciate further guidance on the appropriate level of detail and methodology approach required to build a representative inventory, if any. We also recognize that a strong regulatory and policy framework is important. However, it is not enough on its own. Like many others Article 5 countries, Malaysia faces ongoing challenges with low level of refrigerant recovery, recycling, reclamation, and also destruction. In addressing these challenges, it is important to strengthen capacity building initiative, upskill technicians, develop efficient refrigerant tracking system, and improve access to essential tools and technologies. Additionally, we believe that incentive-based mechanism could serve as effective tools to support early adoption of comprehensive recovery, reclamation, and destruction program. Any successful example or cases on this program is very helpful for my country to refer in the implementation of the last stage of HPMP. Maybe it could be expedite the HCFC phase out through the end of life of the HCFC-based equipment. The incentive-based mechanism or targeted support could also be considered in the preparation of the TOR for the study on the upcoming triennium replenishment under the LRM. We believe with the integration of robust policy, regulation, and incentive program could encourage greater private sector engagement and contribute to the long-term sustainability of LRM management initiative. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Malaysia. I'll move to Cameroon. You've been waiting patiently. You have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. Since it's the first time my delegation is taking the floor, I want to extend my sincere thanks to the government of Thailand for their warm reception. I also want to thank the Secretariat for the wonderful organization. I also want to extend my congratulations to you, to co-chairs for taking the lead. We're looking forward to work with you. In short, we're working with you. I also want to thank the report so far presented to us by TIP, especially Rector. My concern here is we are not very satisfied with the response that Arthur gave with respect to the question that Nigeria raised concerning the way forward with respect to the LRM. You actually said that the Ozone Secretariat should work with the implementing agency. We know very well, with respect to decision 36/2, that for some time now, there have been really scarcity of equipment like the refrigerant identifiers, like leak detectors. We want to ask, the question that we're coming back is that as the RTOC actually taking consideration this aspect in preparing a report, because the last meeting that we had in Tunisia, we had a couple of delegations, A5 countries, complaining not having equipment, especially the identifiers. And these are very important equipment or materials that we need in order to carry out detection or to do control at this level. The question is, do we have this information to really inform us so that we know what to do, especially What we know is that recently we're informed that just one industry is responsible for the for the refrigerant identifiers. Now, I also wanted to know, I understand very well that it is reported that was shared to us recently. It was presented to us that there's a news blend identified. Could the outtalk help us to share this information with us to know the names of those new substances identified? Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Cameroon. Now give the floor to Myanmar. Myanmar, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Co-Chair. So before my question, I would like to express that Myanmar is following Montreal Protocol in its 4 amendments and preparing to sign on the Kigali Amendment. And Myanmar also emphasized on avoiding adoption of high GWP HFCs where possible. Meanwhile, some years we couldn't import HCFC to meet our quota of 50 tons, especially during 2015-2023. For example, our imported amount of HCFC was 39 tons out of its allowable limit or quota of 50 tons in 2023. Now our quota decreased to 25.4 tons for the period of 2025 to 2029. In this case, if we can bring back those missing amount of not imported, so in this case, my question is whether it is technically acceptable or not. And it means that we would like to increase those amount to the existing quota of 25.4 tons. And another question, do you have any concern about such issues in your assessment? Another issue is that we are facing refrigerant identifiers that have not been working since 2020, but we don't have any access to repair or receive support for new identifiers. Thank you.
Thank you, Myanmar. I'll give the floor to Bhutan and EU for your very brief questions, specific questions to the RTOC.
Thank you for giving us the floor, Madam Co-Chair. We promise to keep it very precise. We join the other delegates in congratulating the TEEP for doing this important job. Our concerns have also been brought up by the distinguished delegate from Cameroon, and we would like to add that the TEEP report notes that LRM could benefit from technological innovation, and different implementing agencies have been promoting LRM, including growing global concern and interest in LRM. However, the TEEP reported that there have been less than 10% of amounts destroyed or reclaimed. Our question is, why do you think this is the case, and how does TEEP propose to address them? If it is indeed unreported recovery and reclamation, how do we encourage or find a way for countries to report it? Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, for the floor.
Thank you, Bhutan. That was brief and fast, so I hope that the co-chairs caught the questions. EU, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Co-Chair, for still giving us the floor. We are following on from the question posed by the distinguished delegate from Kuwait, which was answered for R32, which to us is more of an intermediate technology with still a relatively high GWP. So we are more interested in ultra-low refrigerants, such as propane. Especially in the EU, in the sector of small heat pumps that are used in people's houses, the monoblocks, we see a huge uptake of propane. That's a very relevant sector for energy security, for energy efficiency, and for fighting climate change. So essentially, all relevant manufacturers on the market are offering this already. So we'd be very interested to hear how that is penetrating elsewhere, or if it is. So that would be the quick question. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I know give the floor to the co-chairs to respond.
So I'm going to begin by answering the last question from the delegate from EU, while Omar is figuring out the answers for the rest. Your question was, are 290 as a candidate in monoblocks and such? Clearly in Europe, where heating tends to dominate more than cooling, R290 in monoblock systems are growing, and those kinds of things are seen elsewhere as well. But when you start talking about cooling equipment, like in Kuwait, where the systems are much bigger, propane becomes a challenge. And that is one of the reasons why R32 is a very, very strong, viable refrigerant for some of those kind of larger cooling related applications. Now, there was a question that was asked by Kuwait about PFAS, and R32 and propane, neither one of those two will be impacted by some of these PFAS conversations that are going on around the world. But yes, if the system is small enough and if it can meet the charge limits that are set forth in all these various IEC standards and UL standards and so on, clearly propane is a good answer for doing better than R32 when it comes to GWP, and sometimes even energy efficiency. I hope that answers your question. On the question, yeah, let me continue with the question from the distinguished delegate from Bhutan. Bhutan came up with a very quick question. Yeah. So when a refrigerant is recovered, that refrigerant can be reused or recycled or reclaimed. It is the reclamation that very often gets into the record books, if you will. And that is kind of what we were talking about when we say underreported or not reported. The reuse and reclaim, the recycle and reuse, which might very often be done within the same ownership of the refrigerant, if you will, that is not captured very often. And so the number might be actually a little bit more than 10%, but 10% is typically the number that we quoted was what is reported in the official records, if you will. The question of how can we make it better is the entire LRM workshop and everything else that we keep talking about. So I'm not even going to try and answer that question. You want to try and take that?
All right. Thank you. So for the distinguished delegate from Malaysia, we thank you for your comments, and would like to just again refer you to the workshop from CCAC yesterday that provided some information about the processes and also about the LRM report that was published last year. More will come also in the quadrennial assessment report. This is also the same answer that would go to Cameroon when it comes to the LRM part. For the distinguished delegate from Cameroon, again, in answer to maybe something that I failed to mention to the distinguished delegate from Nigeria, about the refrigerant identifier. So the supplier of the refrigerant identifier actually had temporarily ceased the operation, and that caused a significant market delay. However, the operator now resumed and or the operation resumed by the supplier, so we will see more availability of the refrigerant identifier equipment in the near future. So overall, if there are any additional things that we fail to report here, please catch us in the margins. We'll be more than happy to assist you, and also anything that was not reported in the PR will definitely be discussed and discussed at length at the assessment report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, talk members, and apologies if we aren't able to answer the questions right now in plenary, but there is the opportunity to meet in the margins with the talk to discuss your specific questions, give more details so they have more clarity so they can respond. Given the length of time as part of our organization of work, we had discussed moving to questions on any other TEEP issues. What the co-chairs are proposing is that we pause on having the question and answer segment for that particular item. We return to agenda item 3 because we have a draft CRP that has been proposed by Canada and co-sponsors. We allow the Canada and the co-sponsors to introduce the CRP. We know that we're going to have a contact group, and so we will hold questions and discussions for the contact group, which will be meeting this evening from 6:15 to 8 p.m. in CR3. So I will allow the distinguished candidate from Canada to take the floor once parties agree to introduce the draft CRP, and then we will return to the for the final question and answer segment and release the TEEP. I'm seeing no objections. So Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, for coming back to us so that we can introduce our CRP, which I believe was posted. Canada is happy to submit the CRP in collaboration with Australia, Japan, and the United Kingdom. The purpose is to form a basis for discussion on the terms of reference for the 2027 to 2029 replenishment of the multilateral fund. I will not go into a great amount of detail. I just want to briefly, present this CRP, noting that it follows essentially the approach taken from other decisions that provided guidance to the Technology and Economic Assessment Panel on the preparation of a report on the next replenishment. As I mentioned earlier, the decision is considerably simplified as compared to the decision from 3 years ago, largely because a lot of the issues that were still open at that time, for instance, with respect to energy efficiency and the HFC cost guidelines, have now been resolved and form part and parcels of the decisions that have been adopted by the Executive Committee. I just point out perhaps a couple of new ideas that have been put forward in this CRP. One is in paragraph D, which is the possibility to consider an allocation of resources for the digitalization in the servicing sector within HPMPs and KIPs. And in paragraph E, the need for an allocation of resources for a funding modality to support a limited number of pilot projects to enhance regional atmospheric monitoring. So these are issues for which we don't have specific ExCom decisions at this point, even though At its last meeting, the EXCOM did consider a paper by the Secretariat on the funding modality, but we felt without having it in the decision, it may not be quite clear to the TEEP that it is something that should be considered in estimating the funding requirements. There are also some small changes that we have made to other parts of the CRP, again, compared to the one that was taken 3 years ago. But I think we could perhaps discuss those in more detail if we meet in a contact group. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Canada, and to you and the proponents of this draft CRP. So as discussed and proposed earlier, we will have a contact group. There was consensus in the room that this matter should be discussed further. I am seeing a request from the floor from Kuwait. Kuwait, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. I just want to ask a question to the distinguished delegate from Canada for that CRB that he submitted. First of all, I would like to thank him for that CRB, but to capture the element that we never been having the same discussion that we submit CRB on a term of reference for the TIA previously. So this is a new approaches that it's been considered. Why the practice and the common practice, we go to the term of reference, the previous one, and we add all the elements that we need in that term of reference. Because in my point of view, which I worried about a lot, that in this case for a term of reference to a lot of CRBs, then we have a regional CRBs, single country CRBs on the term of reference, and that will consume a lot of time, compile all these CRBs in once, and everybody needs something to be added, and he will submit a CRB for that one. If it's not agreed by the TIAB or the discussion don't goes on the way that this country or region. So I think that we have to look to the CRB in a very careful way, but as a party here, from my point of view, I'm not in favor to have that CRB within that one until I have a clear clarifications legally. If we ask the TIAB to do this one without that CRB, that cannot be done, or we have a mandate to do it, because really I don't understand. Previously we do a lot of things without a CRB and it's moved, but I will understand, but I need more clarification to go through with that CRBs. Thank you very much.
Distinguished delegate from Kuwait, thank you for your intervention. Just so that I understand the intervention clearly, what you're saying is that you would prefer, in terms of standard procedure, for us to work with the previous CRP, and then if we go into a contact group, then to discuss any additions or deletions. Is that correct? Okay, let me just confer with the Ozone Secretariat. Okay, I see that Canada is asking for the floor. So Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I think the distinguished delegate from Kuwait is right that the last time there was no CRP that was submitted, and it was decided the Secretariat had attached the CRP from the previous replenishment study to the issues document, and we decided to work from there. That's not necessarily the traditional way in which this has worked historically. I mean, remember, we've had these studies, since for like over 35 years. Usually there has been a CRP that has been submitted for each one. So, and I think in our view, the situation has changed sufficiently from last time that it warrants submission of a new CRP. I mean, we'll of course welcome any additions that countries want to make, and if there's interest in the contact group to also consider the CRP from the 3 years ago, we're also open to that as well. So I think putting a CRP on the table doesn't preclude consideration of any issues or any other documents really that parties would want to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Canada. Distinguished delegate from Kuwait, do you still wish to hear from the Secretariat on whether this is established procedure? Okay, Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. It is a practice that the Secretariat annexes the previous decision just as a reference for parties, and it is up to the parties then to decide if they think it is useful to use that as a starting point, and having that old decision does not preclude parties or groups of parties from putting forward any CRP to also be used for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozone Secretariat. Distinguished delegate from Kuwait, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and I would like to thank the distinguished delegate from Canada for his flexibility and understanding where I come from about that discussion. The reflection from the Secretariat keep the things open, actually, because I will raise the issue again. If without that CRB and we ask to add addition in the previous CRB, it's the same element or it's a different element? What is the added value of having that CRB, not to insertions of the language of the new CRB that Canada wishing to put within the term of reference or CRB of the term of reference last one? So this is my way. So I'm asking the legal secretary advisor, is adding that text, similar text of the CRB 3 that Canada, CRB that Canada wished to put in that one, is not, can be adopted without the CRB, or it should be with CRB?
Thank you, Kuwait. Secretariat.
If I had understood the question of this distinguished delegate from Kuwait correctly, you were asking whether in the absence of a CRP from a party or a group of parties, the contact group can nevertheless discuss terms of reference, and the answer is it can if it chooses, for example, to use as a starting point the old decision and to work off of that. So, and part of the reason that that was annexed to the note for this meeting was in the event that no party had come forward with a CRP, the contact group, which we know needs to meet as soon as possible, would then have at least a starting point. But so, in other words, whether or not there was a CRP, there could be that starting point for discussions on the terms of reference. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Ozone Secretariat. Given the contributions from distinguished delegate from Kuwait, considering what the Secretariat has indicated, and given that there is a proposal for a draft CRP, and there is consensus that we should discuss this matter in a contact group, I would like to propose to the parties that we proceed to the contact group where you can discuss this matter further, whether you will work from both CRPs and try to combine the two as we've done in previous contact groups before on other issues. So the proposal is that we proceed to a contact group because we agreed that we would have a contact group on this issue, and then the parties within the group can decide which document they prefer to work from as their starting point. Is that an acceptable way forward? United States of America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I don't know that we necessarily object. I am just worried we may spend several hours debating this point. What I wondered if we could do would be, so indeed our understanding of past practice was the last replenishment was a little bit different in that we ended up by default starting from the prior decision. But previous to that, in fact, we have worked off of a proposed CRP. So we've had two different practices here. Most of the time we have worked off of, I would say, an updated CRP. And from our perspective, there's actually value to that because we think it's pretty clear that there are a number of elements in the last decision that are not directly applicable to our discussions here. And while we are not a co-sponsor of it, I guess we would recognize that the CRP introduced by Canada actually does us a little bit of a favor in going ahead and sort of refreshing and updating the decision. That said, we do understand that, so to us, it would actually be helpful to go into the group with a clear mandate to work, that's just a starting point. We could do that with the clear understanding that delegations, including my own, just to be clear, because we have some additions to that, and in fact, we mentioned those in our prior intervention. So we're comfortable moving in with the mandate of that as the starting point on the clear understanding that I think Canada said in their last intervention, that delegates are going to add to that. So a delegate has the right to look at the last replenishment decision that we took and pull paragraphs from that into the decision or to add their own issues that they think are relevant to it. So our own preference, it's just, I think if we could agree to a clear starting point, I think we might have a much more productive discussion, perhaps, than if we go into the group and we debate for an hour or two how we're going to start. So could I propose we start with the draft CRP on that clear understanding that it's the right of everyone in the contact group to add, to bracket, however they want to edit what is in that CRP that Canada introduced, which is only a starting point. So that'd be my suggestion if the room would concur with that. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I see Kuwait is asking for the floor. Kuwait, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. I think this is my point of view, that we are chicken or eggs. This is what I'm saying. We have the old CRB. Let's add to it and delete from it and update it as we wish. Why the starting point should be a new CRB? We have the old CRB and we can add all things to it. So the starting point from my point of view was we keep the common practice and then we update it as much as we want. But now we are saying that the starting point should be the new CRB and we forget the old CRB. But if we need anything from the old CRB, we get the paragraph and put it here. So we have already a starting point previously and we add every element in the CRB that's submitted with appreciation from the distinguished delegate of Canada to that old CRB. This is my point of view about that issue, but I'm flexible in your hand. I don't want to waste the time of the parties here in the meeting, but this is a point of view that I want to mention. And also, I insist that my statement that we have to start from that one and add to it to be add in the report of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Kuwait, and your request for your intervention to be noted in the report will be duly noted. So we have 2 points of view here. It is whether we start from the old CRP and delete or add, or the new CRP and delete and add. I was just wondering if the distinguished delegate from Canada and the proponents have a different point of view on this that could help move us forward. 1 second. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. EU, I'll allow you to take the floor and then we will make a decision on the way forward.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and I will be brief. We simply want to add our voice to the suggested way forward by the United States, thanking Kuwait for their interventions and thoughts, and noting the flexibility of Kuwait. Thank you.
Thank you. EU, Canada, and then China is requesting the floor. So Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I mean, we had also understood that ultimately Kuwait would be flexible on this issue. I would just say that we, together with 3 other parties, have submitted a CRP in line with previous practice in considering this issue. And, you know, we think at least the tradition within the Montreal Protocol is to consider the CRPs that have been submitted in accordance with the practices and rules of the Montreal Protocol. So, you know, we would like, you know, this CRP to actually be considered by the contact group. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. China, you have the floor.
谢谢主席我们支持科威托的这个建议在原来的基础上也可以进行一个大家重新的一个添加讨论。谢谢。
Thank you, distinguished delegate of China. I see we have India and Lebanon now requesting the floor. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. So as India, we would also like to support Kuwait. We would like to make changes in the earlier CRP rather than bring a new CRP here. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Okay, we're now seeing additional requests for the floor. So we have Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and Argentina. We will close the list there and decide on the proposal way forward. So Lebanon, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We would like also to support Kuwait's suggestion on moving forward with the old CRP. However, we still have flexibility because as the distinguished delegate from US mentioned that we can look at the CRP that was also provided by the delegates from Canada, but to start in bracketing the CRP in order to provide support from different delegates and parties in the contact group. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. المملكة العربية السعودية تدعم مقترح دولة الكويت. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you. Saudi Arabia, Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora copresidenta. Por nuestra parte, consideramos que también la práctica previa en general ha sido trabajar sobre el documento anterior y en ese sentido nos sentimos más cómodos iniciando en ese punto con flexibilidad para poder incorporar las propuestas que otras delegaciones han realizado, pero tratándolas sobre la base como ha sido en los últimos casos, entendiendo también que las expresiones que se dieron hoy en el plenario no fueron específicamente sobre un documento a tratar, salvo el caso de los que están sponsoreando el CRP, sino en realidad de avanzar en un contact group para tratar el tema. Gracias.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Argentina, and I thank all parties for their contributions. First, I would like to thank the distinguished delegate of Kuwait for noting his flexibility in discussing this issue. As chairs, we would propose, noting that there is a CRP that was proposed, a draft CRP. that it can be considered in the contact group bracketed as suggested by other delegations, and we use that as the starting point, noting the objection, well, not the objection, but noting that Kuwait and other delegations wish to start from the previous document, but so that we have a way forward, the co-chairs would suggest that we move to the contact group with the proposed CRP bracketed from the delegations of Canada, Australia, Japan, and other co-sponsors, and then we could utilize and add to that particular CRP. That is the proposed way forward. Okay, so a contact group will be established. We're to run from 6:15 to 8 p.m. in CR3. Co-chairs identified for this contact group, Ralph Brieskorn of Netherlands and Mirusa Mohammed. I wish to thank all delegations for their flexibility. With that, we would like to Kuwait, you have the floor.
Sorry, man, I will not go to that issue, but I just want to confirm the timing because we have a coordinating meeting for the Article 5 parties, but I didn't capture the timing of you because that we will miss the beginning of that contact group. We already established a contact group for Article 5 parties from 6 o'clock to 7.
Let me confer with the Secretariat. Okay, conferring with the Secretariat, we can adjust the time of the contact group from 7 to 8 p.m. Is that agreeable? Thank you, distinguished delegate from Kuwait, and thank you to all delegations for your flexibility. So I'd like to move back to the questions on any other issues for the TEEP so that we can complete these discussions, question and answer segment. So are there any questions on any other TEEP issues that were not raised in the previous interventions related to progress reports? Open the floor, and I see Norway. Norway is ready to ask a question. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We want to thank the TEEP for the presentation of their progress report this morning. We have one question related to the options for the organization of the TEEP and its talks. But first, we would like to express our appreciation for the TEEP's efforts in proposing options for organizing their future work. So we took notes from the meeting document 47/2, addendum 1, that has been issued by the Secretariat, that the option 1 would be the TEEP's preferred options. But we did not recall that the TEEP expressed any preference during the presentation, so I thought it could be useful for us to hear from you on this matter. And we also took good note of the pros and cons that you highlighted, and especially regarding pros and cons related to the 2 large talks. So in case the large talks would be separated in smaller talks, you mentioned challenges in managing cross-cutting issues, but on the other side, should the talks be kept as one talk, but divided in subgroups? You mentioned challenges in managing the organization of such large talks. So we were wondering which one of the challenges you would consider would be easier to manage. Thank you.
Thank you. Norway, United States of America, followed by Senegal and Argentina. USA, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I think similar to Norway, our question was very simply, the TEEP has provided a series of options. We want to be very clear that these are all options and that the TEEP was not expressing a preference of one option over another, but simply providing pros and cons. Also, just to be clear, these were options, but was the TEEP suggesting there were no other options that could develop from asking questions at this meeting, and perhaps between now and the MOP, for example, the TEEP could provide other information, that this was not exclusively only these options, but a starting point? Thank you.
Thank you, USA. Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame. Le Sénégal revient sur le N2O, l'oxyde nitreux. Ça a été mentionné dans le rapport au niveau du MBTOC. Ce qu'on souhaiterait, c'est que puisque le N2O aussi est un puissant gaz à effet de serre, et puis qui n'est pas encore contrôlé par le protocole de Montréal, mais listé dans l'annexe de la Convention de Vienne, on souhaiterait savoir dans quel autre secteur ce gaz a été étudié et ensuite quels sont les travaux en progrès par rapport à cette substance. Merci.
Thank you, Senegal. Seeing only 2 other requests for the floor and proposing that we take the questions from Argentina and Canada. So if there are any other parties that have questions, I encourage you to quickly take the floor or indicate that you wish to speak so that we can close the list and close this item. So Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora copresidenta. En este caso nos gustaría volver sobre el punto de los PFAs que había surgido en la presentación del TIP y que fue un punto que tocó nuestra delegación en reuniones previas, donde se expresó la necesidad de que el TIP abordara puntualmente los escenarios respecto de la incertidumbre que planteaba la prohibición de los PFA en el caso específico de los HFO como alternativa. Nos gustaría conocer si se ha profundizado un poco más en esta cuestión y puntualmente en el caso de que la prohibición de PFAs de ciertas regiones alcance a los HFOs, que son la única alternativa para el caso de espumas en algunos usos, si se ha analizado puntualmente qué opciones quedarían o cuál sería el impacto que esto tendría. Muchas gracias, señora copresidenta.
Thank you, Argentina. And I see the final request is from Canada. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. My question is specifically with regards to the proposed configuration of the MC talk. Now, whether, the option 1 to restructure it into 2 subcommittees or option 2 to separate it into 2 different committees. In either option, one committee or one subcommittee would be handling aerosols and medical applications, and the other one, all other chemical applications. Could the TEEP provide a little bit more understanding on how this would still maintain a kind of a balanced membership between the 2 committees or subcommittees? Because we see, in the case of the Chemical Technical Options Committee, we see a lot of issues that it deals with, from CTC to solvents to feedstock, process agents, semiconductors, very short-lived substances, HFC 23 emissions, life cycle refrigerant management, and basically any other chemical issues that don't fit into the other Technical Options Committee, whereas the other one would then handle only aerosols and medical applications, which consist mainly of MDIs and sterilants. Would you still maintain sort of like a similar level of membership for each committee? And if so, could you explain why that would be, given the different levels of issues that each one would actually be responsible for? Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Canada. Noting the time, I see 1 request for the floor from the EU. So I'd like to close the list after the EU and make a proposal on the way forward. So EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. It's also about the point about organization of work of TIAP and its talks. When we were reading the detailed report, we noted that TIAP indicated that presently under MC Talk, they were already working in some kind of subgroups and then coming together again. So my question would be, if I look at option 1 as they have defined it, how different would the practice be between what is established today in that group and what would happen if you have the MC Talk restructured in a way as was indicated in option 1? Would that be a significant difference of your habit of working as you have today? Or in the end, are these kind of similar practices? And if something would change, where would you see the further gains in efficiency potentially under that option? Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from the EU. Noting the time and the fact that the distinguished delegate from Kuwait indicated that A5 parties do have a coordination meeting at 6 p.m. The proposal from the chair is that we table the Q&A session for this evening. We allow the TEEP and the panels to confer on the questions, to provide responses, and we reconvene with the question and answer segment where they can respond to your questions in the morning. That is the proposal, so that the A5s can have the coordination meeting. With that proposal on the floor, are there any objections to this? Not seeing any objections at this time, so I will hand over to my co-chair, Annie.
Thank you very much. It's been a very long afternoon, and we would like to thank you for your patience. We would also like to seek your flexibility because we've had a bit of a rethink about the timing of the first contact group on the replenishment terms of reference. And we actually propose instead that the contact group meet at 8:30 tomorrow morning till 9:45. That way, there is plenty of time for the coordination for the Article 5 countries, and also it does not leave other parties waiting around for an hour this evening. So if I see no objection to that proposal, we will not have any contact groups this evening. We will leave it free for coordination, and the Replenishment Task Force Terms of Reference contact group will meet tomorrow morning at 8:30 in CR room in CR3 with the co-chairs as indicated by Chantal. I don't see any objection to that proposal. So thank you very much, delegates. I appreciate your patience this afternoon and your flexibility. And we will see you back in plenary tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Thank you and good night.